Now, step number one is connecting questions. That's where we're taking the focus off you, the salesperson, and we're putting that focus on your prospect right off the bat. Connecting questions takes the focus off you, the salesperson, and puts it on your prospect. Now, when I'm talking about connecting questions, I'm not talking about asking the prospect how the weather is, how are you doing today, Mr. Jones? What city do you live in? Who won the game the other night? Every prospect knows you are genuinely not interested in how their damn day is going, right? Like everybody knows you're not going to sit there for 20 minutes and hear that out. When you say things like that every other salesperson says, it actually triggers most of them to emotionally start shutting down and not open up to even the very best questions you ask. They stay surface level with you. And then at the end of that conversation, you get objections like, I need to think it over, or I need to do more research. You've got to stop the madness. See, I'm talking about skilled questions. You use them when you call outbound leads, or you talk to inbound leads, or you talk face-to-face, or if you sell door-to-door or in a boardroom meeting, it doesn't matter. Now, the consequence of not asking connecting questions with the right tonality especially, or even knowing how to ask them, is when you start out a call with the traditional selling phrases like, hi, my name is, I'm with ABC Company, and the reason why I called you, Mr. Jones, was, or, hi, John, it's blank from XYZ Company. How's your day going today? Do you have 2 minutes we can talk? What immediately goes through most of your prospect's mind? Salesperson, right? Trying to sell me something. So it triggers what's called sales resistance very early from your prospects. Now, why is that? Because doesn't every single salesperson sell and say the exact same thing when they're trying to make a sales call? We have to understand this. Within the first 7 to 12 seconds of any sales call or sales interaction you are involved in with a prospect, they are subconsciously, they can't even help it as a human being, picking up on your verbal and nonverbal cues from your tonality and what you are saying and or asking that triggers their brain to react in one of two ways. So if you come across aggressive, if you come across needy, and if you come across attached, and you don't know the right questions to ask, it triggers their brain to go into fight or flight mode. You've heard that before, fight or flight mode, where they try to get rid of you fast, and they say things like, oh, I'm too busy right now, can you call me back later? You know what, at second thought, I don't think we need it, or we already have a company for that, we don't have the money for that or the budget, I'm good. Hey, can you just get to the point? How much is this gonna cost me? Early in the conversation. Can you call me back in a week, a month, a year later? Does that ever happen to you? Now, once you start learning NEPQ, neuro-emotional persuasion questioning, and you learn how to come across more neutral, especially in the beginning of that conversation, you're unbiased. You're not quite sure if you can even help yet. You don't know anything about their situation. How could you? You come across more relaxed, more calm, and more detached. Detached is the key word. And you ask the right questions at the right time. It triggers their brain to become curious enough where they feel like they want to engage. They want to open up to you because they feel like you might have something important to them. So we have to come across detached from the expectations of making the sale and really focus on whether or not we can actually solve their problems, whether there's even a sale to be had. Now, do I mean when you get on a sales call or in any type of sales interaction, your goal is not to make a sale? Well, hell no. Your goal is to make a sale on every single call, or at least advance them smaller commitments to making that sale, depending on if you sell B2C or B2B. But you have to keep that to yourself, because the moment they feel that you are just selling them is the moment they do what? They start to emotionally shut down. Let's take a look at situation questions. That'd be step number 2 in the process. So situation questions help you and your prospect find out what their present situation actually is. Most of your prospects don't even know when you first start talking to them. Now, typically with most industries, you're going to ask 3 to 4 of those after connecting questions, depending on what you sell. Some industries, maybe more complex selling environment, you might ask 5 or 6 different situation questions. It depends on your industry. Now, the consequence of not asking situation questions or understanding what that means and how to ask is you never really understand what's going on in your prospect's world. You don't understand their history. You assume you know because other prospects have told you in the past. So you assume that everyone's situation is the same. And because you never find those details out, you end up losing sales that our clients who sell exactly what you are make every day. The third step, problem awareness question. These are one of the most important to know. What problems do they have, if any? What caused the problem? Like, what's the root cause? And how is it affecting them even personally? So we're going to ask these right after your situation questions. So with these questions, you'll find out what their problems are, what caused the problem, like the root cause, and most importantly, how the problems are actually affecting them even personally. And they help you bring the person's problems from their subconscious part of their mind to their conscious mind, which builds massive urgency for them to want to change their situation now, not later. That means buy now from you, not down the road. So without asking these questions, without knowing how to do it, the consequences are you don't bring out the prospect's emotions. So they don't feel they need to make a change. That's why you keep getting objections like, I need to think it over, your price is too high, we don't have the money, the budget for this. Let me talk to my spouse, my business partner, my CPA, my grandma, my uncle who lives in a van down by the river. We don't need this. I need to do more research. We need to get more quotes. I need to look at other companies first before making a decision. Can you call me back a week, a month, a year later? That's why you're getting it. You're triggering them to say those things because you don't understand yet what questions to ask and the delivery of those work with human behavior in your sales process. All right, let's talk about the four-step solution awareness questions. Remember, we've gone through connecting questions, first step, situation questions, second step, problem awareness, third, solution awareness questions, fourth. These questions involve your prospect and their ideas, which causes them to emotionally attach themselves to solving the problem and doing that with you. Solution awareness questions help your prospect start to own their problem emotionally rather than you, the salesperson, owning their problem emotionally. That could be a problem. These questions help them look at their present situation. We call that their current state, and also look at what their future is going to look like once all of their problems are solved. We call that their objective state. What will that look like once they solve their problems? You've just helped them see very clear in their mind with your solution. What's the gap? So what's the gap in between the current state and their objective state? It's all these newfound problems that you've helped them see that they have by asking your skilled NEPQ questions. Now, the bigger the gap, the more they feel the pain, the more they feel the urgency, the need to solve those problems. Now, if you don't know the right questions to get them to feel that pain and to relive the pain, that means the gap becomes much smaller. They don't feel the need to do anything. And that's why you keep getting a bunch of objections like I went over. I want to think it over. I need to do more research. I need to get more quotes because you don't have the gap. Now, the cost, the consequence of not knowing how to ask solution awareness question means you end up owning their problems and chasing them rather than them owning their problems, pulling you in and chasing you down to buy. You see the difference? All right, let's move on to the fifth step, consequence questions. Now, consequence questions help them question their way of thinking and explores the consequences of what's going to happen if they don't do anything about solving the problem. And consequence questions are some of the most powerful questions you can ask that allow your prospect to question their way of thinking of why they allow it to keep going. Now, the cost, the consequence of not understanding how to ask consequence questions is you miss being able to help them psychologically sell themselves on wanting to do something about their problem now, not months down the road, especially if you're in a more of a complex selling environment that takes months to close. Consequence questions can reduce your sales cycle by 50 to 75%, meaning they close themselves much faster than you having to go to meeting after meeting after meeting while they shop around if you sell B2B. All right, sixth step, let's talk about qualifying questions. Qualifying questions confirm how important is it for them to change their situation. You can use these at the beginning of the conversation if you get a hint that maybe they don't have the funding, you got to qualify them, the middle, or even the end if you get little hints or red flags that they have an objection, they might not be that serious about changing, or maybe they don't have the fund, you can always qualify. Now, the consequences of not understanding how to ask qualifying questions is you end up talking to prospects who can't even get the funds for your solution even if they wanted. They just cannot get the money for it. Or if you sold B2B, you might end up talking to somebody who can never make a decision. They're not a real decision maker, so you end up doing free consulting, okay? All right, 7-step transition, how to transition in your presentation and questions, or how to transition in the next stage. These help you naturally transition into going over how your solution will help them solve these newfound problems. And they help bridge your presentation if you're in a one-call close, presenting back to them what they told you they want and how your solution can solve their problems they just told you they had. Now, if you're in a more complex sound environment, or even if you sold B2C and you had a 2-call close, or if you sold B2B and it's, sometimes a 2, 3, 4, 6-month close, depending on what you sell, the industry, these help you transition naturally into the next step of your sales process. Now, that next step for you might be a demo, or going over a proposal, or meeting other decision makers in that firm. Now, the consequences of not knowing how to ask transition questions, so you transition naturally into the presentation or whatever the next step is in your sales cycle, is you end up sounding like you're trying to push them to the next step rather than them pulling you in and wanting to take the next step with you, which opens them up even more to what you're offering. It's very key. All right, let's talk about step 8, committing questions or commitment questions. These help your prospects commit and take the next step to purchase what you're offering. Do it now, not later. Now, in NPQ, only 5% of your sales process is you trying to close. Do you know why? Because they've already closed themselves because of the questions you're asking them in the conversation that's allowed them to see very clearly in their mind that it is far less risky for them to pay for your solution, problems get solved, they get what they want, than it is for them to do nothing at all, stay in the status quo, the problems stay the same and nothing ever changes. Which is more risky? It would be like us asking you which is less risky. Getting the funding together to have us train you in our virtual training courses, your problems get solved, you make double or triple or more than what you are now as a salesperson, or if you're a sales leader and you want your teams to duplicate, you're going to make more. Or is it more risky for you to do nothing at all, keep selling the exact same way you always have been, you stay at the same income level and nothing ever changes? Which is more risky? See how that sticks in your mind? So you're going to ask a few committing questions to help them commit and take the next step to purchase what you're offering, and do that now, not later. Now, the consequences of not knowing how to ask commitment questions is when you use old school closing techniques like, do you want the red one or the blue one, Cindy? The option close. Why don't you just give it a try, George? The invitation close. Okay, I'll go ahead and schedule this. Do you want to take delivery Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning? That's kind of assumptive option close there. Are you wanting the contract to go in your name or your company's name? The choice close. If I could show you the very best XYZ, would you be interested? The demonstration close. You see, those old school close, and I could list probably another 1,000 of those, but those old school closing techniques, they do what? For the most part, they trigger sales resistance because they feel you're just trying to close them, and it causes the prospect to throw out objections and try to get rid of you. Then you start doing what? You have to chase them, following up all the time. And what do most people do when they feel chased? They run the other way. They naturally want to retreat from that sales pressure, and that pressure is coming from you. What exactly do you do yourself when you feel pressured by a salesperson? You do one of two things. You'd either, number one, you get defensive, you throw out objections, and you reject what they're offering, right? Or number two, you say things like, this looks really good. Can you send me more information? I'll call you back. And then you go missing in action, you disappear from them, and you never return their calls, emails, or text messages. You know what I mean? So ask yourself, do your prospects ever do one of those two things to you when you try to close them and pressure them? They do, don't they? Now, you know why.